Think you know everything about the groovy 1960s anthology series that launched Happy Days? From accidental casting stories involving future Vegas stars to the bizarre recycling of MGM's famous brass bed from Elizabeth Taylor films, Love, American Style harbored secrets that would make even the most devoted TV historians do a double take. Prepare to discover the wild behind-the-scenes world of television's most romantically ridiculous show. Fact 1. The magical brass bed time traveler. If you ever wondered why that gorgeous, ornate brass bed appeared in practically every single episode of Love, American Style, the answer reveals one of Hollywood's most fascinating examples of prop recycling. That bed wasn't just any ordinary studio furniture piece created specifically for the show. It was actually a genuine antique that had already lived through multiple lives in some of Hollywood's biggest productions. The brass bed originally belonged to Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer Studios, where it first gained fame as a key prop in the 1958 film adaptation of Tennessee Williams' steamy drama, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. In that movie, the bed served as the central piece of furniture where Elizabeth Taylor and Paul Newman's characters played out their tumultuous marriage, with Taylor delivering some of her most memorable performances while lounging on its ornate frame. But the bed's Hollywood journey was far from over after that acclaimed drama-wrapped production. 6 years later, in 1964, the same brass bed found itself transported to an entirely different kind of story when it became a prominent plot element in The Unsinkable Molly Brown, the biographical musical starring Debbie Reynolds. In this film, the bed actually became part of the storyline itself, as characters got into disputes over its ownership and value, making it more than just background decoration. When Love, American Style began production in 1969, the show's producers somehow acquired this piece of MGM history and decided to make it their signature prop. Rather than using it occasionally, they made the brilliant decision to feature the brass bed in nearly every single episode's main segments, regardless of the story's setting or characters. This created an unintentional running joke among viewers who began to notice the same distinctive bed appearing in different homes, apartments, and hotel rooms week after week, creating a subtle thread connecting all the show's romantic vignettes across its 5-year run. Fact 2. Phyllis Davis's accidental 5-year career. Sometimes the biggest breaks in Hollywood happen when you're not even looking for them, and Phyllis Davis's casting story on Love, American Style proves that luck can be more important than any audition process. Davis, who would later become famous as the glamorous Beatrice Travis on the hit detective series Vegas, landed her recurring role on Love, American Style through what can only be described as a complete accident. Davis had absolutely no intention of auditioning for anything when she walked into Paramount Studios one ordinary day. She was simply there to have lunch with a friend, probably expecting nothing more than a casual meal and conversation. However, the casting directors for Love, American Style were in the middle of an exhaustive search for new talent, having already looked at over 200 actresses without finding what they were looking for. As Davis later recounted the incredible story, someone at the studio spotted her in the hallway and immediately saw something special. Without any formal introduction or scheduled appointment, this person approached her with 2 simple questions that would change her career forever. Do you have a bikini? Can you do lines? These weren't exactly the typical questions you'd expect during a casual lunch visit, but Davis was game enough to say yes to both. What happened next sounds like something out of a Hollywood fairy tale, but it actually took place in real life. The producers brought Davis in front of the network executives and show producers right there on the spot, gave her a few lines to read without any preparation time, and asked her to perform an impromptu audition. Her natural charisma and screen presence came through immediately, and by the end of that same day, she had landed a contract to appear as one of the show's regular repertory players. Davis described the entire experience as a fluke, but it was a fluke that lasted for years, giving her steady work throughout Love, American Style's entire 5-season run from 1969 to 1974. Fact 3. The Cowsills got fired after 1 season. The Cowsills, the real-life family band that directly inspired the Partridge Family television show, had the honor of performing Love, American Style's memorable theme song during the show's first season in 1969. However, their time with the series came to an abrupt and unexplained end when the second season began, creating one of television's more puzzling behind-the-scenes mysteries. The Cowsills were a natural choice for the original theme song, as they perfectly embodied the wholesome family music trend that was sweeping popular culture at the time. Their harmonious vocals and clean-cut image made them ideal representatives for a show about love and romance in America. The family group, which consisted of several siblings and their mother Barbara, had already achieved significant success with hits like Hair and Indian Lake, making them recognizable names to television audiences. But when Love, American Style returned for its second season, viewers heard a completely different version of the theme song. The Cowsills had been replaced by a group called the Ron Hicklin Singers, who were also credited as the Charles Fox Singers on the show. This replacement created an ironic twist that probably escaped most viewers at the time, because the Ron Hicklin Singers were actually the same studio musicians who provided the singing voices for the Partridge Family's records. This means that the real family band that inspired the Partridge Family got replaced by the fake family band's actual singers, creating a bizarre circle of musical substitution. The Ron Hicklin Singers featured brothers John and Tom Baller among their members, and they kept their version of the Love, American Style theme song for the remaining 4 seasons of the show's run. The reasons behind this sudden change have never been publicly explained by the show's producers, leaving fans to wonder whether it was a creative decision, a business dispute, or simply a desire for a different sound as the show evolved during the early 1970s. Fact 4. Harrison Ford's pre-Han Solo romance debut. 8 years before Harrison Ford became a household name as the cocky smuggler Han Solo in Star Wars, he appeared on Love, American Style as a shaggy-haired romantic lead named Roger Crane in a segment called Love and the Former Marriage. This early television appearance gave audiences their first glimpse of the dry wit and natural charm that would later make Ford one of Hollywood's biggest action stars. At the time of his Love, American Style appearance, Ford was still working as a struggling actor who had been taking small roles on television shows like Gunsmoke, Ironside, and the FBI to pay the bills. During this period, he was also working as a self-taught carpenter to support his family, building cabinets and doing renovation work for clients in Hollywood, including writers Joan Didion and John Gregory Dunn, who lived in Malibu. Ford's segment on Love, American Style showcased his natural comedic timing and the slightly sarcastic, roguish personality that would become his trademark in later films. The role allowed him to display the same kind of confident, wisecracking character traits that would make Han Solo such a memorable figure in the Star Wars saga, as well as the adventurous spirit that would define Indiana Jones. What makes this appearance particularly interesting is that it demonstrated Ford's range as a performer during a time when most people in Hollywood saw him as just another bit-part actor trying to make it in the business. The show's romantic comedy format gave him a chance to show off his ability to deliver snappy dialogue and play the charming love interest, skills that would prove invaluable when George Lucas later cast him in American Graffiti and then Star Wars. This early work on Love, American Style essentially served as a preview of the screen persona that would eventually make Ford one of the most recognizable and beloved actors of his generation, proving that sometimes the seeds of stardom can be found in the most unexpected places. Fact 5. One of only 4-hour long laugh track shows ever. Love, American Style achieved something that almost no other television show in broadcasting history has ever accomplished. It successfully ran for a full hour while using a laugh track throughout its entire runtime. This unusual combination made it one of only 4 television shows ever produced that featured both an hour-long format and artificial audience laughter, creating a unique viewing experience that challenged conventional television wisdom. Most comedy shows that used laugh tracks were designed as 30-minute sitcoms, where the artificial laughter helped guide viewers through quick jokes and brief storylines without becoming overwhelming or intrusive. Hour-long television programs, on the other hand, were typically reserved for dramas, variety shows, or game shows that didn't need artificial audience responses to maintain viewer engagement throughout the longer runtime. The decision to combine these 2 elements was considered a risky broadcasting experiment when Love, American Style premiered in 1969. Television executives and producers generally believed that laugh tracks would become annoying or tiresome if sustained for a full hour, potentially driving viewers away rather than keeping them entertained. The conventional thinking was that audiences could tolerate artificial laughter for 30 minutes, but extending it to 60 minutes might make the viewing experience feel forced or unnatural. However, Love, American Style's anthology format helped make this unusual combination work effectively. Instead of trying to sustain one continuous storyline with laugh track accompaniment for an entire hour, The show broke up its runtime into multiple shorter segments featuring different characters and situations. These individual segments were connected by brief blackout comedy sketches, creating natural breaks in the laugh track that prevented it from becoming monotonous or overwhelming. This innovative approach to television formatting influenced the way producers thought about comedy programming and demonstrated that traditional broadcasting rules could be successfully challenged with creative solutions, even though very few other shows have attempted to replicate this particular combination since Love, American Style ended its run. Fact 6. The Happy Days backdoor pilot phenomenon. On February 25, 1972, Love, American Style aired a segment called Love in the Television Set that would accidentally create the template for one of the most successful decades in television history. This seemingly innocent episode featured Ron Howard as teenager Richie Cunningham, Marion Ross as his mother, and Anson Williams as his friend Potsy, introducing characters and a nostalgic 1950s setting that would eventually spawn an entertainment empire. What makes this timing so remarkable is that this Love, American Style segment aired a full year before George Lucas released American Graffiti, the movie that most people credit with starting the 1950s nostalgia craze. This means that the Cunningham family and their wholesome Milwaukee neighborhood actually predated the cultural phenomenon that supposedly inspired Happy Days, creating a fascinating case of television accidentally predicting a major cultural trend. The segment was originally produced as a pilot for a proposed series called New Family in Town, but ABC had initially rejected the concept. Producer Garry Marshall managed to get the pilot reworked into a Love American Style segment, essentially using the anthology show as a testing ground for his family-friendly sitcom idea. When the segment aired, it attracted positive attention, but still wasn't immediately picked up as a regular series. However, after American Graffiti became a surprise hit in 1973 and sparked nationwide interest in 1950s culture, ABC suddenly remembered Marshall's pilot and realized they already owned the rights to a show that perfectly captured this newly popular nostalgic mood. The network quickly ordered Happy Days as a regular series, which premiered in 1974 and ran for 11 seasons. For syndication purposes, the original Love, American Style segment was later retitled Love and the Happy Days, officially acknowledging its role as the foundation for what would become one of television's most successful franchises, including multiple spin-offs like Laverne and Shirley and Mork and Mindy. Fact 8. Garry Marshall's secret Japanese pseudonym. Years before Garry Marshall became famous for directing romantic comedies like Pretty Woman, The Princess Diaries, and Runaway Bride, he was working as a television writer who came up with one of the most creative solutions to avoid being typecast in Hollywood. Marshall wrote many of the short comedy blackout segments that appeared between Love, American Style's main stories, but instead of using his real name, he credited his work to two completely fictional Japanese writers named Samuro Mitsubi and Tawasaki Kui. These fake Japanese names were Marshall's clever way of protecting his reputation as a serious television writer while he experimented with different types of comedy material. During the late 1960s and early 1970s, writers often worried about being pigeonholed into specific genres, and Marshall was concerned that writing too many silly comedy sketches might hurt his chances of getting hired for more prestigious dramatic or sitcom writing jobs. The blackout segments that Marshall wrote under these pseudonyms were typically very short, lasting only 10 to 20 seconds, and featured visual gags or quick one-liners performed by the show's regular comedy troupe. These brief sketches served as transitions between the longer romantic story segments, giving viewers a moment to laugh before moving on to the next tale of love and romance. Marshall worked on these comedy bits alongside his writing partner, and together they created dozens of these miniature comedy scenes throughout Love, American Style's 5-season run. The fake Japanese names became something of an inside joke among the show's production team, who knew the real identity of these mysterious comedy writers but kept the secret for years. This early experience writing quick, punchy comedy material would later prove invaluable when Marshall transitioned into directing films, as he learned how to craft memorable comedic moments that could capture audiences' attention in just a few seconds, a skill that served him well throughout his legendary career in Hollywood. Fact 9. The animated cartoon that spawned a hit series. On February 11, 1972, Love, American Style did something completely unprecedented in its entire run by featuring an animated segment called Love and the Old-Fashioned Father. This cartoon segment was the only animated piece ever to appear on the show, making it a strange departure from the live-action romantic comedy format that defined the series. But it would prove to be one of the most successful experiments in television history. The animated segment was created by Hanna-Barbera Productions, the famous animation studio behind the Flintstones and the Jetsons, and it told the story of a traditional father trying to deal with his modern family's changing values during the cultural shifts of the early 1970s. The cartoon featured the voice of Tom Bosley, who would later become famous as Mr. Cunningham on Happy Days, playing the role of Harry Boyle, a confused dad struggling to understand his children's contemporary attitudes about everything from politics to relationships. What made this segment particularly remarkable was that it served as a pilot for what would become Wait Till Your Father Gets Home, a syndicated animated sitcom that launched later in 1972 and ran for 3 successful seasons. This made it the first time in television history that an animated series had been spun off from a live-action anthology show, creating an entirely new category of television programming. Wait Till Your Father Gets Home was designed as Hanna-Barbera's answer to the popularity of All in the Family, attempting to create an animated version of the generation gap comedy that was dominating television at the time. The series dealt with more adult themes than typical Hanna-Barbera cartoons, including topics like war protests, women's liberation, and social change, making it a groundbreaking experiment in animation that targeted adult audiences rather than children. The success of this unusual crossover between live-action and animated television proved that creative risks could pay off in unexpected ways. Fact 10. The failed 1985 daytime comeback disaster. More than a decade after the original Love, American Style ended its successful primetime run, ABC decided to bring back the romantic anthology concept with a daytime revival called New Love, American Style that premiered on December 23, 1985. The network scheduled this updated version to air during the afternoon hours, hoping to capture some of the magic that had made the original series such a hit during the early 1970s. To give the revival a fresh sound that would appeal to 1980s audiences, ABC hired the legendary soul singer Lou Rawls to perform an updated version of the classic theme song. Rawls, who was famous for his smooth vocals on hits like You'll Never Find Another Love Like Mine, brought his distinctive style to the familiar melody, creating a more contemporary feel for the rebooted series. The new show featured a regular rotating cast that included Arsenio Hall, Bob Saget, Larry Vigas, and Laura Summer, who appeared in different episodes playing various characters in the romantic comedy segments. This was a significant change from the original format, which had relied primarily on guest stars and a small group of blackout comedy performers, rather than maintaining a consistent ensemble cast. However, the revival faced an impossible challenge in its time slot, as it was scheduled directly against The Price is Right on CBS, one of the most popular and long-running game shows in television history. The Price is Right had been dominating daytime television for years, and had built an incredibly loyal audience that was not interested in switching channels for a romantic comedy anthology. The competition proved to be devastating for New Love, American Style, which struggled with consistently low ratings throughout its brief run. After just 8 months of disappointing performance, ABC canceled the series on August 15, 1986, ending the attempt to revive the Love, American Style brand, and proving that some television magic cannot be successfully recreated. Fact 11. The show that launched 1,000 careers. Love, American Style served as an incredible launching pad for future Hollywood stars, featuring early career appearances by actors who would go on to become some of the biggest names in entertainment history. Beyond Harrison Ford and Diane Keaton, the show's guest star roster reads like a who's who of performers who were just beginning their journey toward stardom during the late 1960s and early 1970s. Albert Brooks appeared in a segment called Love and Operational Model, showcasing the dry, intellectual comedy style that would later make him famous in films like Broadcast News and Lost in America. Sally Struthers, who would become beloved as Gloria Bunker on All in the Family, appeared in Love in the Triangle, demonstrating the comedic timing that would define her television career. The show also featured an early appearance by Sissy Spacek, who would later win an Academy Award for her haunting performance in Coal Miner's Daughter. Ron Howard appeared not only in the famous Happy Days pilot segment but also in other episodes, building on his reputation from The Andy Griffith Show and establishing himself as a reliable young performer who could handle both comedy and drama. The anthology format was perfect for showcasing these emerging talents because it allowed them to play different types of characters without being locked into long-term contracts or specific character archetypes. What made Love, American Style particularly valuable for young actors was that it offered them the chance to work with experienced directors, writers, and established guest stars in a relatively low-pressure environment. The short segment format meant that even if one story didn't work perfectly, it wouldn't damage an actor's reputation, while successful performances could lead to more substantial roles in television and film. The show's casting directors clearly had an exceptional eye for talent, consistently choosing performers who possessed the charisma and skill needed to sustain long-term careers in a notoriously difficult industry. Fact 12. The mysterious third attempt that never was. In 1998, ABC made a third attempt to revive the Love, American Style franchise by producing a pilot that featured two major television stars of the late 1990s. Melissa Joan Hart, who was at the height of her popularity starring in Sabrina the Teenage Witch, and Mariska Hargitay, who would later become famous as Detective Olivia Benson on Law & Order, Special Victims Unit. The network had high hopes for this revival, believing that casting these popular actresses would help attract both younger viewers who knew Hart from her comedy work and older audiences who remembered the original Love, American Style from its 1970s heyday. The pilot was designed to update the romantic anthology concept for a more contemporary audience, while maintaining the basic format of multiple love stories presented in a single episode. However, unlike the previous revival attempts, this pilot faced a very different fate in the television landscape. Rather than being immediately picked up or quickly canceled like the 1985 daytime version, the pilot found itself in television limbo for several months, while ABC executives tried to decide whether the concept could work in the increasingly competitive late 1990s television market. Eventually, ABC made the unusual decision to air the pilot as a standalone television movie on February 20, 1999, giving viewers a chance to see what a modern Love, American Style might look like. This strategy allowed the network to gauge audience reaction without committing to a full series order, essentially using the broadcast as a test run for the concept. Despite featuring recognizable stars and receiving the promotional support of a television movie premiere, the pilot failed to generate enough enthusiasm from either viewers or network executives to justify moving forward with a regular series. The project was quietly shelved, marking the end of ABC's attempts to revive the Love, American Style brand and leaving this pilot as a curious footnote in television history. Fact 13. The title's bizarre Italian comedy connection. The title, Love, American Style, has a surprisingly international origin story that traces back to a critically acclaimed Italian comedy from 1961 called Divorzio all'Italiana, which translates to Divorce, Italian Style. This film starred the legendary Italian actor Marcello Mastroianni and earned Academy Award nominations for both Best Director and Best Actor, making it one of the most successful European comedies of its era. The Italian film's title created what linguists call a snow clone, which is a type of formula that can be adapted by substituting different words while keeping the same basic structure. In this case, the pattern of concept, nationality, style became a popular way to describe cultural phenomena throughout the 1960s, with people using variations like politics, American style, or fashion, French style, in everyday conversation and media headlines. The connection between the Italian film and the American television show became even more direct when Hollywood produced Divorce, American Style in 1967, starring Dick Van Dyke. This movie was actually a deliberate spoof of the original Italian film, adapting its themes about marriage and relationships for American audiences while maintaining the distinctive title format that had become recognizable to moviegoers. When television producers were developing Love, American Style just 2 years later, they consciously borrowed this established naming pattern to suggest that their show would explore romance and relationships from a distinctly American perspective, just as the Italian film had examined divorce from an Italian cultural viewpoint. This created an unexpected cultural bridge between serious European cinema and lighthearted American television entertainment. The success of Love, American Style helped cement this naming convention as a lasting part of American popular culture, with the something American Style format continuing to appear in titles, headlines, and casual conversation for decades afterward, proving how a single Italian film could influence an entire generation of American entertainment. Fact 14. Stuart Margolin's loveless loser character. Stuart Margolin, who would later become famous as Angel Martin, the quirky informant on the Rockford Files, created one of American style's most enduring characters through his portrayal of Lamar, a hapless romantic failure who appeared in the short blackout segments between the show's main stories. Lamar was essentially the anti-hero of love, a perpetually unlucky guy whose attempts at romance always ended in embarrassing disaster or complete rejection. What made Margolin's performance so memorable was his incredible ability to convey disappointment, confusion, and romantic desperation using only his facial expressions and body language. Since most of the blackout segments lasted only 10 to 20 seconds, there was rarely time for extended dialogue, which meant Margolin had to tell entire stories of romantic failure through his rubber-faced reactions and physical comedy skills. Lamar became a recurring figure that viewers looked forward to seeing, as his misadventures provided a comedic counterpoint to the successful romantic outcomes featured in the show's longer segments. While the main stories typically ended with couples finding love and happiness, Lamar's brief appearances reminded audiences that not everyone was lucky in romance, creating a bittersweet balance that made the show's overall tone more realistic. Margolin's connection to love, American Style, ran deeper than just his on-screen appearances, as he was actually the brother of Arnold Margolin, one of the show's producers. This family connection helped secure Stewart's regular role in the blackout segments, but his talent and comedic timing were what made the character truly work and resonate with audiences. The character of Lamar became so popular that many fans of the original series remember him more clearly than some of the guest stars who appeared in the featured segments, proving that sometimes the smallest roles can leave the biggest impression on television audiences when performed with genuine skill and creativity. Fact 15. The Failed Pilot's Graveyard. Love, American Style became television's most creative recycling program by serving as a second chance for pilots that had been rejected by networks but were too expensive to simply throw away. The show's anthology format made it the perfect place to repurpose these failed concepts, since each episode already featured multiple unrelated stories that didn't need to connect to any ongoing storylines or established characters. One of the most notable examples of this pilot recycling was a segment called Love and the Good Deal from the first season, which was actually the original unaired pilot for a sitcom adaptation of Neil Simon's play and movie Barefoot in the Park. This pilot featured a completely different cast than the version that eventually made it to television, giving viewers a glimpse of what might have been if the network had chosen different actors for the popular comedy series. The process worked like this. When a television pilot was produced but not picked up by a network, the production company would still own the completed episode and all the money that had been invested in creating it. Rather than letting this investment go to waste, producers could rework the pilot into a Love, American Style segment by adding romantic elements to the storyline and adjusting the script to fit the show's format requirements. This arrangement benefited everyone involved, as the original pilot creators could recoup some of their production costs. Love, American Style got professionally produced content at a reduced price, and viewers got to see high-quality stories that might otherwise have never been broadcast. The show's flexible format meant that these repurposed pilots could be easily integrated without disrupting the overall flow or style of the series. Many other anthology shows from this era occasionally featured failed pilots, but Love, American Style made this practice into an art form, successfully transforming dozens of rejected television concepts into entertaining segments that fit seamlessly into their romantic comedy framework.